Hi, in this episode I'll be talking to Jim Elliot, the founder of Diveheart, a non-profit organisation that seeks to help less able-bodied individuals get in the water and dive. Over a brew, Jim tells me how he left his career in the media industry to become a full-time volunteer and teach individuals with disabilities how to scuba dive. 5 years later, in 2001, he founded Diveheart. Do you fancy a brew? So what brew have you got?
What brew? I'm trying to wake up, so I'm drinking coffee this morning. I might have some bourbon and coffee if I were at your hours.
Funny you should say, I was speaking to a guy who's up in Newfoundland that I'm hoping to get on in a couple of weeks. And his version of a brew is like brewed beer.
Yeah.
You know, like these cask ales. So he's like, oh, mate, do you normally get drunk while you're having these? I'm like, not normally, but if you want to, we can swap what I would say a cup of tea or a coffee. You just whip it out and we'll get on the piss and we'll get on the beers and we'll do that. Right, should we get to it?
Sure.
So, Jim Elliot, welcome to Fancy a Brew podcast. For those of you who don't know who Jim is, I'll let him introduce himself in a second. But Lewis Marinucci introduced us quite a while ago. He was one of my initial guests. And to be honest, he's probably one that I've struck up the best friendship with. We speak more regularly than any of the other 30-odd guests that I've had on. So if Lewis is listening to this, thanks very much for introducing us. And so, Jim, if you could give a little introduction to yourself and let everyone know who you are, what you're about, and then we'll see where we go with that.
Sure, and I'm really glad Lewis introduced us. He's one of our greatest ambassadors. My background, as I was saying earlier, I'm not a scuba guy. I grew up in media. I was a journalist and with the Chicago Tribune, WGN Radio, and helped start up a TV station called Chicagoland Television News here in the Chicagoland area. My experience with people with disabilities, my father was a disabled Army vet, and I raised children with disabilities. My oldest daughter was blind, and in the 80s, mid-80s, I got her involved in downhill skiing. And I saw how powerful skiing was, what it did for her confidence, self-esteem, independence. And as a diver, it's really funny, I took diving in college because I thought, as a journalist, if I ever meet Jacques Cousteau, I better know how to scuba dive, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was just like another arrow in my quiver, and I got underwater, as you know, and it was like, oh my God, right? This is amazing. So, since the 80s, I was brainstorming, we could do this in diving, and mainly thinking physical disabilities, getting people out of the wheelchairs and getting them standing up underwater. And that's the greatest thrill for me, is to watch somebody who's a wheelchair user for the first time stand up underwater and look down and go, oh my God, I'm standing up for the first time since my injury. And that's exactly what I do. I laugh and I hold my regulator inside out and breathe in water because I'm laughing so hard. And then all of a sudden they're like, you see in their face, just like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And so I after a successful career in the media business, my kids were grown and gone. I was divorced, and I said, I'm going to roll the dice and leave a successful career and start Diveheart and do the same thing in diving that I was doing in skiing with the blind skiers. And it was amazing. I never thought that we would be where we are. I thought it was going to be a little club thing where, we would do some pool stuff and then we would go to the quarry in the summer, and then we would go on a trip or two, maybe 2 trips. That would be a lot, I thought. Yeah. And we have programs all over the world now. It's amazing. Used to have a chapter in Birmingham, and I have an instructor near you, I believe, Josephine, but Malaysia is a huge program, Borneo, all over the U.S. Like I was saying earlier, we've helped spin off over 40 nonprofits around the country, and we want these nonprofits to grow, and we help them any way we can. With my media marketing background, I believe that anyone that decides, for example, if you're an instructor, you have a dive operation, and you want to do adaptive scuba, but you don't know where to start, we can get you started. And then once you become a Diveheart adaptive instructor or operation, then what we do is we promote the heck out of you. We want people to come to you, just like BZAC or Patty or any of the other organizations out there. The difference is we're a 501c3 in the U.S., which is considered a charity. So you would, for example, in the US, you could donate to us, and at tax time, you could write that donation off theoretically. The laws always change, but so that's the kind of nonprofit that we are.
Right.
And that's our primary mission. The training falls under the Diveheart umbrella. Our work with veterans, our research with university medical centers. So there's, so that's kind of how I got to where we are. And I'm kind of surprised that we're as big as we are. And we actually have changed the dive industry in the US. When I started doing this in 1997, and we incorporated Diveheart in 2001, but when I started in 97, there was I really had to struggle to find an adaptive scuba agency, and finally found one that called their divers handicapped divers, and so became their instructor trainer and became #1 in the world, but realized that empathy training only goes so far. So I could make you blind theoretically and run you through some pool and open water exercises, and then tie your legs together and make you a pair, make you a quad. And that's fine and good, but it doesn't give you the confidence and experience that you need to work with people with disabilities. And so Lewis was telling you about his Cozumel trip, and we'll go to Cozumel, for example, and for a week you're having breakfast, lunch, and dinner with people with disabilities. And we usually have no more than 6 per boat with disabilities, and then we have 2 to 3 buddies for each one of them. So we figure a boat holds, maybe 20 to 30 divers. So we try to keep it manageable. And then you'll dive with adaptive divers in the morning. You might be diving with Lewis one day, who has autism, and then you might be diving with Karen, who has a spinal cord injury, or someone who has a traumatic brain injury. So by the end of the week, you've really gotten to know these people and talk, and you're sitting down at dinner with them and learning about the psyche and how they feel and how they got to where they're at. And then you're also diving with them during the week, and then you're training with me in the afternoon, usually until dark, and then then we go debrief in the hot tub.
Cool. Right. Before you give anything else away that I can ask you about, let's jump back a little bit. So you said that you started off with adaptive ski training for your daughter specifically. Now, I've done some skiing in my time. Fortunately, I did it through the army, so we were trained. It wasn't just let's go and have a crash around on a mountain. So we had some form of training, and I found it very hard, and I can see. So how on earth can someone who's blind get from top to bottom of a mountain in something that I find quite hard? Could you give us a bit of a steer on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the very first thing you do is it's all challenge by choice. So we orient them to the equipment. So we tactily, on the inside of the lodge or whatever, we have them feel the equipment, and we talk to them about the edges of the skis, and we talk to them about, we have them stand up and have them, squash a bug with their big toe, so they know that's kind of how you initiate a turn, and you're going to lift a little bit on this leg. And so we kind of go through all the equipment first. And then, of course, we start on a nice flat area. And then we graduate to a little bit more of a slope. And then they can hold on to my skis, my poles next to me. Or I might ski backwards in front of them and talk them through the turns and kind of, brace them or be there so that if they start to lose control, I can grab them right away. And then once they're comfortable initiating turns, then there's a couple different ways to guide them. Usually we start out behind them because sound travels downhill better.
Yeah.
So if I'm calling out turns to you, I can go left turn, right turn. Good. And what I like to do is once I get you going pretty good on a green, and it's a nice wide green, I might put you in the middle of the ski hill. And if there's no hazards in the way, I'll tell you to free ski. And then you initiate your own turns because you've learned to turn now. Yeah. And all I do is go, good, great job. Yeah, right. Kind of try to be a positive reinforcement. Yeah. And then if they begin to get too far towards the edge, I'll say, I'm in the middle, and I'll yell that. And if their goal is to use my voice as a beacon to come back into the center. Mm-hmm. And then if they can't, then I start guiding again. I go, okay, right turn, left turn. And they know, when we talk brief about it, of course, ahead of time, that if I start guiding you again, you're in the guide mode until I tell you to free ski again.
Yeah.
But that's a big thrill for them to have the independence to be in the middle of the hill initiating their own turns. And we'll brief them on every fall line. So maybe you got a double fall line, and we'll just say, be careful, because it was not just going straight down. This was going straight and to the right and stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much how we get them going. And then when you start racing, my daughter raced for a while.
Get out.
And then I would get in front of her. And this is much more challenging for the blind ski guide, because what I need to do is I need to turn. And now I'm yelling uphill, right? Calling out turns. And I'm going around a gate. And then I'm trying to manage me going around the gate and then talk them around the gate. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's successful and sometimes it's not so successful. So it's fun.
Is there a massive difference then between someone who's been born blind versus somebody who, developed blindness? Because I would assume if I've been born blind, I don't know anything different. But because I can see now, if tomorrow I can't, I've got that fear of the unknown. I mean, granted, over a number of years, that would perhaps deplete. But when you come to that sort of adaptive training, is there a massive difference between the two?
There is. When you're born blind, this is your normal. You don't know anything different. The challenge is you've been told perhaps your entire life that you can't do things.
Yeah.
You can't do this. You're blind. You can't. And some of my daughter's peers, their parents, we'd be at an event and their parents would be cutting their food for them, and they were like 12 or 13. I'm like, what are you doing? Yeah. And they're like, well, Johnny can't do this. He's blind. I go, he can do anything. Blind people can do just about anything. When my daughter was diagnosed, they thought she had brain damage. Right. And so when the neurosurgeon came out and said, good news and bad news, good news is she doesn't have brain damage. Bad news is she's blind. I'm like, yeah, she's blind. All right. I felt like I could do anything with a blind kid. Right.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge that you have, is as that you grow up, you're told you can't do things. Right. So that's a thing you got to get over, right, to take on skiing, I think. And then traumatic injuries are now if I'm blind in an accident or I get macular degeneration and I lose my sight, now all of a sudden I have loss. I'm no longer who I was. I'm no longer the man I was. I'm something less. So I'm depressed. I'm angry. Now you got to get past some of that stuff with the individual.
Yeah.
And it's challenging. And you've got people that are fiercely independent who are blind, who are almost dangerous at times because they want to take chances that they shouldn't. And then you've got people that are fiercely dependent, who will have you get their coffee and their tea and have you, wipe their butt and all that kind of stuff. So it's, and they'll play you too. They'll work you. They'll have you running around like a valet doing stuff for them. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's interesting though, but you've got the loss on one hand.
Yeah.
And then you have your entire life being told you can't do things. Mm-hmm. So you just have to get to know the individual. And over a number of years, I was able to identify quickly where their head was at. And once I was able to do that, then I could work with them from wherever their perspective was. And I was always the kind of guy like where it's all, like I said, challenge by choice. So you don't have to do something. One of the divers I was working with, she was a quadriplegic school teacher, and she came to watch us in a pool in Pittsburgh, I think, or Pennsylvania somewhere. And she said, I'm not here to get in the water. I just want to watch. And I go, that's cool. You could watch. And I said, here, let me pull the gear out of the water and show you the kit. So I pulled the kit out and I sat it on the side of the pool, and I show her the regulators, and I show her this and I show her that, and put it in my mouth and let her breathe off the alternate, blah, 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 blah. And she goes, all right. She says, I'll get in the water, but I'm not going underwater. I said, that's okay. You don't have to go underwater. So we get her right on the side of the pool. and very, just talk to her. We're talking to her at the surface, and I put the reg in. And I said, watch, I'm going to go underwater, and I come up, and so pretty soon she goes, okay, I'll go underwater, but I'm not going in the deep. I'm staying right here.
Yeah.
So I go, okay, you don't have to go in the deep. So we're down there, and she just loves it, right? And so I'm slowly moving her into the deep, but she's facing the shallow, so she doesn't know we're going into the deep, right? Yeah. So finally we get into like 15 feet of water. Well, she's of course in midwater somewhere around 6, 7, 8 feet. And, I've been equalizing her and helping her, so she doesn't really have to do anything but breathe. And we talked about how to breathe, and control your buoyancy and stuff like that. And all of a sudden she looks around, and she realizes she's in the 15-foot area, and she's like, oh, she looks at me like, I'm going to kill you. And I'm laughing, and I'm like, are you okay? And then she looks around, and it's like, oh my God, I'm okay. And we had her boyfriend doing a scuba experience as well. So he's in the water with her with the other instructors. Yeah. And all of a sudden they're together. And I'm like, get them together. And we're taking pictures and stuff. Real. And it was just like she won the lottery, man. It was so cool. But sometimes you have to use sleight of hand. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's always, you don't have to do that. No big deal. And then pretty soon they're going, I want to do that. So
I've done that. We've had like Cub Scouts, Girl Guides, whatever you want to call them nowadays, that have come to our club in the pool. And you always get the one that's quiet and timid. So you jump on that and sort of have a laugh and a bit of a joke with them and try and relax them in exactly the same way. Yeah. And then before they know it, the sort of length on the bottom in 15 foot of water going, oh, bloody hell, I wasn't expecting to be here. I'm loving it because all the mates are there at the side of them going, oh, they were dead nervous before.
Right.
But I can see how you can relate one sport to the other because of how I understand you touch kit, you show kit, the difference being you're showing via voice, aren't you, and touch rather than actual sight. So
that's how they speak.
Yeah. Have you had any sort of formal training, or is this just a concept and an ability that you've sort of encouraged in yourself?
Well, when, like I said, I've been around people with disabilities a long time. My dad was in a wheelchair as an Army vet with a disability. So I've been around them a long time. I walked a friend to school who had cerebral palsy, who was being picked on by bullies all the time. And I would kind of get in between him and them and say, you can get him, but you got to go through me. And I said, you probably will beat my butt, but you're going to know you were in a fight. And 9 out of 10 times that works. They back down a lot. And so I kind of started building understanding, but then the skiing taught me some obviously my daughter's blind, right? So X number of years before I started the skiing with her, I was around therapists and blind teachers and all sorts of people and learned how to guide, all that kind of stuff. So mobility experts. So I was watching them teach her. Right. And so I would begin to learn some of the techniques that they would use for all sorts of different things, going through doorways, up and down curbs and stairs and things like that. And then with the blind stuff, I kind of brought in what I had learned and enhanced their training program. They have a land clinic. And what we did with Diveheart training is we had no such thing in the adaptive program I originally learned with. So I created a land clinic where we have you be blind and you learn all about what it's like to be blind on land before you ever get in the water and become blind. So you have an understanding. And then there's other things we do in the land clinic with full face masks. As a matter of fact, we started using full face masks underwater. And I was thinking about blind people. I'm like, why would somebody blind want to learn to scuba dive? How stupid is that? You need to see what's going on, control your buoyancy and all that. And then I thought, wait a minute, maybe we could make this cool and use a full face mask with communications. And then we could put their hand on something and then push a button and narrate to them and say, hey, the wreck went down at this time and all that kind of cool stuff. And it would enhance their experience. So we originally started using full face masks to narrate to blind people and give them a more enhanced experience underwater. And then we just started using them for traumatic brain injuries and all sorts of other disabilities, cerebral palsy and stuff and it worked out really well.
I've been listening to a podcast today. Two of my friends run another podcast in the UK, but they've just had a guy on who's developed blindness over time. So he's the deepest blind diver. He's been to 140 meters.
Wow.
with an 8-pound torch that implodes at 111 meters.
Oh my God.
But I was listening to it today. I've not finished it, and it wasn't because I was talking to you. It was just the next podcast to listen to, and it's kind of ironic that the two things are linked. But I listened to him talking about how he started diving when he was at college, and then he didn't for a few years because he was into other things like motorbikes and whatnot. He started to lose his sight in his sort of, I think, mid-20s, early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
So he couldn't be on his motorbike anymore. I suppose you can, but I mean, riding it on the road, he couldn't. So he got back into diving while he still had some peripheral vision, and he's massively into wreck diving. And I'm sure he gets on to the point that you just brought. How can someone communicate to him where he is in the water, what he's doing? The full face mask totally makes sense to me because you've got the full set of comms, haven't you?
Yeah. Otherwise, you're tactily giving them, gauge signals and are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. And I've used the tactile signals with sighted divers when we're in the quarry or something, and all of a sudden there's a silt out, right? And now all of a sudden you can't see anything, and you just reach over and take your buddy's hand, and if nothing more than just giving a squeeze, saying, "Are you okay?" And he squeezes back, saying, "I'm okay." And multiple squeezes means there's a problem. So we address that and surface if that's what it takes.
Tell me what was like the catalyst to you actually starting Diveheart?
Sure. Well, I with the skiing, the parallel was I said, you can only ski at certain times of the year and in certain places in the world, but there's a pool in every community. So mainly I was thinking the heavy lifting would be done in swimming pools, and it's where it is. I'm a Rotarian. When I was in London, I met with Rotary clubs and presented there, and do that all over the world, wherever we go. Before I come and start a program, I make sure I work with service organizations because when I leave, I want this to be a community effort and stuff.
Yeah.
But I started teaching people disabilities in '97 when I left the media business, and began working with a rehab hospital and coined the phrase scuba therapy and promoted that at the hospital. And they had a warm water pool, and I would just not even put fins on people. We put them in the kit and we would just kneel down in 3 or 4 feet of water. And I just really had them focus on what they would hear with their breathing. And then I taught them how to do like a fin pivot where they would just kind of hover. And then I had them close their eyes and breathe and just kind of get the whole Zen part of diving, the breathing part and the feeling, the ambient pressure and the warmth. And warm water is really important for us because people with disabilities, they have thermoregulation issues, so they become hypothermic very quickly. So warm water is a key thing. And our long-term goal is to build a deep warm water facility so that we can replicate in confined water what we see in open water.
Right.
So in 2001, I went to a friend, I taught his children how to dive, and he was an attorney, and I said, "I know you're a trademark attorney, and I have this idea for this heart." I said, "Someone probably has already taken it, as a trademark." And he said, "Well, let me check." And he did a check. He said, "I talked to my partners and it's available. So we're going to trademark Diveheart for you. And then we're also going to do all your 501c3 incorporation pro bono. So we're going to make you a charity for free. And we're going to trademark all your marks and protect them all over the world." And I said, "Wow, this is amazing." And they said, "By the way, the minute we finish this paperwork process, you can go out and start raising money." And I said, "Wow, that's great." And then you just start having little fundraisers and do things to start. And I don't draw a salary, so I had no, and I was started Diveheart in my grandfather passed away, and my mother's like, do we put mom in a home? An old folks home. And I said, "No." I said, "I'm divorced." They said, "They have 3 bedrooms. I'll move in." She didn't drive, so I drove her and had no expenses that way. And then had no salary. So I just, as you raise funds, you start to put them where you need. We need full face masks. Okay, that's where that money's going, and different things. And so you just build it. You put one brick on top of the other, and you know, you run into some amazing volunteers and people that will help you at different times. And some come into your life just like friends or anyone else, relationships, and then they leave, and then they come back later. And so I never try to burn bridges. So when I first went around to dive shops and I went, hey, do you want to have a Diveheart hat? Do you want to have a Diveheart shirt? And you could raise money and give it to Diveheart, you know, or we could split it. And I had one dive operator, the largest one in Chicagoland, say to me, why would I sell your shirt or your hat when I can sell mine and keep the whole $20 or whatever, right?
Really?
And I said, you know what? That's a good point. You're a good businessman, but we're not going anywhere. And it turns out years later, he became one of our largest donors. He would close down a dive operation and give us all the gear for our programs.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, big promoter.
Sorry to interrupt this episode, but I'm so excited to announce that the first of our patrons of the Fancy a Brew podcast have come on board. Each week I spend at least 7 hours producing, editing and launching each podcast episode, and sometimes spend many days producing the YouTube videos. To help keep this content strong and valuable to you, I'm asking that you become a sponsor and a patron of the Are You Scuba Diver Fancy a Brew podcast. When you become a supporter, not only will you have my undying appreciation for helping support the podcast, but you will get a shout out from me on the next episode and your very own Fancy a Brew merchandise. So I'm delighted to give a shout out to our first supporters. So number one was Kuba Grobluski. He's a long hose diver, a wreck diver, a skydiver, and a guitarist from Poland. He was the first one that came on board. Thanks so much, mate. I really, really appreciate it. The next one would be Craig Ely. He's a CCR cave and mine diver from Devon, and he's covered in tattoos. He's got some awesome ink, and he really has an opinion that I value, and he's steered me in the right direction sometimes when I've needed it. So thanks guys, I really appreciate it, and anybody else that can come on board. If you'd like to help and support and get your own shout out, then go to www.patreon.com/Fancy a Brew. Without further ado, let's get straight back to it and crack on with this episode then, eh? If somebody wanted to sort of get involved with you, whether it be someone who had a bit of money spare to just donate into you, or wanted to get involved in your organisation within regards to becoming an instructor, I'm assuming you've got loads of different social media outlets and that, but what's the general way people get involved with you other than hearing about you like I have?
Sure. Spreading, you know, I was telling you a little bit earlier about outreach and education that we do. We probably have 200 news stories. We have NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams, and public television has done documentaries. CNN has done a bunch of pieces on us. So ABC, NBC, all the networks have done things. And we have those on our YouTube channel, but also on our website. And we're redoing our website now during COVID-19, right? Yeah. So we have a lot of time to do that kind of stuff, database updates and stuff. But so if you don't dive and you're in the UK or you're anywhere else in the world and you want to help us, certainly you could send money or donate online. But another way is to just go through some of our stories. For example, we've done 10 years of symposiums in adaptive scuba and scuba therapy. So we'll have university medical centers from Duke, from Northwestern, from Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, Rehab Institute of Chicago, Shriners Hospital, different organizations that will talk about the benefits of scuba therapy from their perspective as a hyperbaric physician in the case of Duke, or a rehab doctor in the case of Northwestern University. And we, of course, have those. We didn't capture them every single year that we've been operational, but we do have probably 8 out of the 10 years we had videographers that were willing to help us out, and sharing those with the medical community, sharing those with physical therapists, occupational therapists, rehab docs, kinesiologists, showing them some of the things that other professionals in the medical community are saying about this amazing therapy where there's no gravity. You know, there's a lot of great therapy, right? There's horseback riding, and there's rock climbing, and there's, you know, basket weaving, but we have the franchise, right, as divers on zero gravity. And I'm like, that's no small thing.
No, I struggle I really struggle to explain to people what it is about diving that is my therapy. I mean, yes, it's in some ways it's sensory deprivation. It's just quiet, it's peace and quiet out of the normal working day, coming away from the world and just peace and stillness and quiet. And the concentration I have to put into something else, but it's just that one thing rather than the 20 things, that juggling act of life. So that's my therapy, that I don't need to go for a counselling session every week to release. So if somebody else has got loads of trials and tribulations going on in their life, it must work for them regardless of the abilities or inabilities. So it's just sort of selling that dream, but I really struggle sometimes, I think, to put that across to people so they understand why I've spent £10,000 on loads of kit just to go and have therapy. But it's more than that, isn't it? It's not just...
Yeah, we're doing a lot of physical outreach and education. We have a very high volume traffic area in downtown Downers Grove, where we're based, just west of Chicago. Yeah. And we put out tables, and we have volunteers talking to people, of course, with our masks on and things like that. And when someone across the street, there's a 4-story building. And I have a big television monitor, and I have a incomplete quadriplegic in Cozumel, Mexico, where we're on a nice sandy flat, and the current's behind him, and he's actually looks like he's running along the bottom as best he can with his abilities. Yeah. And I'm swimming in front of him, videotaping him, and it's probably on an 8-minute loop, and it plays, and people just go, "Oh my God," And he had a stroke, so he has a left arm, looks like a classic stroke victim, all messed, and locked in place. But with his right hand, he's able to move a little bit, and his feet move a little bit. And when he looks like he's going to fall on his face, he just breathes in and he comes right up. And when he gets a little too high, he exhales. Mm-hmm. And every time he clears his mask, he says, "Jim, I cleared my mask because I was smiling too much." And my mask was flooding. But I'll be at the table and I'll show them that video. Mm-hmm. And then I'll point across the street to the building. And I'll go, "Imagine if you could jump off of that building and like Superman, just hover right above the intersection, mm-hmm. completely in control." I go, that's what diving's like. If you're going to tell somebody in 2 seconds what it's like. Yeah.
Well, you've kind of led me on to 2 questions, but my wife asked me to ask you, what's it like, Cozumel? We're going to Tulum in December. In Mexico, and obviously Cozumel's not a million miles away.
You're going to love the cenotes. Yeah. And we would do an adaptive dive trip, and the last day we would take adaptive divers to the cenotes just to clean the gear, right? Because it's all fresh water, right? So we've been diving all week in salt. Now let's get in the fresh water. And then we stopped doing that as we got older because we realized we had to carry people 1,000 steps down the cenotes. Yeah. And after a while, I was like, let's just dive on the boat again one more time and rinse our gear. Mm-hmm. But getting to Cozumel, we work with dive operations all over the U.S., and we do a lot in the Florida Keys. Rainbow Reef is the #1 PADI instructor training center in the country, if not the world. And they do our programs regularly. And we go there a lot, but I can't afford, Cozumel is cheaper than going to Florida.
No way.
Yeah. And I trained all the instructors and dive masters at Dive Paradise, which is the #1 dive operation in Cozumel. So I started going there, and when I started working with adaptive divers, I realized that once I get you neutral and I teach you how to use your breath to control your buoyancy and pick out visual references on a wall, now you look at that sponge and now that fan, and you're at 50 feet because you just draw a horizontal line. Mm-hmm. And now you just have to glance up and look at that. And then you use what abilities you have. So once I get you to 50 feet and I help control your kit and get you neutral, then your job is to watch me and stay level with me. Mm-hmm. And I never take my eyes off of you. You know what I mean? And we usually have 2 to 3 divers that are highly trained in with each adaptive diver. Mm-hmm. So once we get to 50 feet on a wall, now I don't have to do anything. In Cayman, I've got to hold on to you if there's no current and kick you around, or bonaire. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then we switch. We have a signal for switching. So now I move to the front, another guy moves to the back, and now he's got to kick you around. But Cozumel, once I get you neutral, I go like this.
that must be a massive release to them to be almost independent and
They're
free.
totally independent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're doing all their own. They're controlling their up and down. If they want to turn and they can only use one arm, they're just using that one arm to turn and do a 360 and give whatever the okay sign is. You know, some can say okay, and some it's kind of different. You know, but yeah, that's the goal. My goal with any adaptive diver is to get them neutral, make them independent, and then take tons of pictures and video. Because when they go home with that, they're different people. They're no longer self-identifying as somebody in a wheelchair with a disability. Now they're self-identifying as a diver. Yeah, I'm a scuba diver, man. Oh yeah, sure you are. Yeah, check this out. Look at my Facebook page, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, dude, that is crazy, you know? And it creates a paradigm shift. Now it's not Johnny in a wheelchair, it's Johnny the scuba diver. And then we try to encourage them to become good stewards of the environment and get involved in coral reef restoration, marine biology, oceanography, and give back that way as well. And the cool thing is when, like this guy I had running along the bottom, he'll influence people around him, family and friends and doctors and therapists and coworkers if he has a job. And that ripple effect is very, very powerful. When my daughter was young and she was skiing, when I was at WGN Radio, I had buddies that would come up to me and they'd say, Jim, you know, I was always afraid to take on this challenge in my life. But then I saw your daughter blind, you know, skiing and she's blind. I'm like, well, you know, if she could ski and she's blind, maybe I could do this. And I'm thinking, wow, this guy hardly even met my daughter, but he's changing his life because he's been inspired by somebody with a disability. So the goal is to take this unrealized human potential that exists in people with disabilities and create that paradigm shift I talked about. Now they're scuba divers to go on and take on other challenges, but then they motivate people around them. They inspire people around them to do better things. And then, you know, if you do 1,000, you might touch 100,000 people. If you do 1,000,000, now you're talking some scale, right? And that's why we want to build a facility where we can replicate stuff and just have tons of people in and out of the water all the time and get that deep warm water experience, not out in an environment that could be hostile, right? Where there's water movement and there's animals and there's current and all this different stuff, but where it's safe and you have people around you who are highly trained. And then take them to Cozumel. But to answer your question, Cozumel is for the money. From Chicago, you can't beat it.
What kind of terrain are we looking at underwater? You know, the topography. Is it all coral reefs or is it flat sandy beds with loads of marine life? I've no idea. Ashamedly.
There's a great variety, but you want to definitely dive the Palancar reefs, Palancar bricks, Palancar gardens. Some of the most fantastic huge structures that you've ever seen, that I've ever seen. And I've been a lot of places, not everywhere certainly, but you know, you go to the Philippines for the little stuff, right? But this is like doing immense swim throughs and you know, holding, that's when we hold, this is a signal for I'm going to hold on to you, and we hold on to the adaptive diver and we talk already about how we're going to go through, who's going to go first, and then when we release them again, we just go, are you okay? We're going to release you. And then they go, yeah, I'm okay. But wall structure, Santa Rosa, I mean, there's some amazing reef and walls mainly. That's a big thrill. But then they have they could have rip and current. I mean, you could be in current where you can barely keep control of yourself. There have been times I have not handed off the adaptive diver, the quadriplegic, because we're going through this current so fast and the terrain is changing so much that I'm like, they're not going to be able to handle this person. You know, it's everything for me to do it. And I've been doing it forever. And so there's that. And then there could be tons of fish life on those reefs. And then you got sand, right? Now you see huge eagle rays, or you see, you know, and you just kind of putz around and they like to find the little stuff. They'll find the splendid toadfish, which is unique to Cozumel, which is pretty cool.
We were only there for 14 days and it kind of supposed to be some kind of chill out, non-diving holiday that we just we're still going diving, but not taking all our kit, you know.
Yeah, if you're going for that long, you need to get over there. Take the ferry from Playa del Carmen.
Yeah.
And the diving on the Playa del Carmen, Cancun side is very different than Cozumel, the island.
Okay.
But definitely get to the island. Find Dive Paradise.
Okay.
Tell them. Yeah, tell Dive Paradise. Tell them that you're friends of Diveheart.
Yeah.
And that we suggested you dive with them.
Definitely, will do.
You won't regret it.
Yeah, my bank balance might do. I've got to get all the way over there.
Right. Well, if you're there already, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cheap ferry ride over, and then.
All right.
Yeah, I never got to the Red Sea. I started a program in Haifa in Israel for kids with autism.
Yeah.
With other Rotarians, but I was there 2 weeks and never got to the Red Sea. That was on the agenda. It just never happened.
Well, speaking of agendas and things not happening, how's COVID affected you?
We had 11 trips, 6 international this year, adaptive trips that we pushed into 2021. All of our water programs, and we have programs in about 6 or 8. We call them Diveheart teams, where we insure the pools, we insure the instructors. Those are all suspended until 2021. We do have instructors and instructor trainers that are still teaching, but they're independent, and they might work with a dive shop, or they might be independent and do their own thing. So they might be doing programs on their own. But I did not want to put the Diveheart stamp on any kind of official program that could potentially hurt someone who already has comorbidities and high compromised immune systems. Yeah. So we're retooling. We're redoing the website, redoing brochures, redoing our database, enhancing our training program. Going to be adding additional programs to that, specific to things like autism or traumatic brain injuries or wheelchair usage, stuff that we touch on in some of our general. We have a manual and we have an online training program. And the people that did our online training program did Patty's and did Dan, Divers Alert Network, did their training program. So it's as good as anything's out there in able-bodied scuba. So we also been doing outreach and education. So this last Saturday, I dressed up like Santa Claus and put on a scuba tank and was dancing around in front of our office with our other volunteers manning the booth. And someone just donated a truckload of holiday decorations to us. Yeah. So we redid our offices. We have 3,000 square feet. 1,000 of it now is like a store. So people can go down and they can pick out decorations and make donations and help fund what we do. So I'm always turning over all the rocks, trying to figure out ways that we can take donated cars and things like that and flip them and turn them into program dollars. So we're doing that kind of stuff. I'm doing a lot of Zoom meetings, like this, presenting to Rotary clubs, presenting to doctors and therapists all over the country, all over the world, actually. So this has really been really interesting to us. DEMA, the big international dive show, is going to be virtual this year. And later on today, we'll be having a meeting about our schedule that we're going to have there, having our training coordinator who's down in Key Largo, coordinating this part of it. And then I'll talk, and then my executive director will talk, and then we'll have doctors from Northwestern or Duke jump in and talk about different aspects of scuba and the benefits. So, and then we want to do our next symposium. We usually have it in May, and it was 2 years ago. It was in Cozumel in May at their conference center at the Hotel Cozumel. This year, obviously, we had to push it, but we'd like to do the next one. If we can't do it live, we want to do it virtual and learn from the DEMA experience. So
I've heard of another dive show that's gone virtual, and I think in my head, I'm struggling to understand how that's going to go. So I'm quite interested. I think it's the last weekend but one of October. It's called Scuba Digital. I don't know if you come across it. I don't know if it's a UK thing or not. I'm not really sure. Just a friend of a friend's talked to me about it, and I seen an invite to it the other day. So I'm quite interested to see how that goes, because a lot of the world's going to be like this I don't think 2021 is going to be much brighter than 2020, to be honest.
I'm with you. I agree.
I'm kind of much like you, do all my back office and administration, get all my, as they say, put all your ducks in a row, And then when we can get back on to doing good things, planning, preparation, whatever that might be, is already done, and you can just hit the ground running.
Exactly. Yeah, we have 150 scuba tanks. They're all getting hydroed. They're all getting visual inspections. They're all of our regulators. We repool tested everything.
Yeah.
Switched out what we needed to, and so we're working hard at getting all of our kit up to speed so that when we hit the water again, we're ready to go.
Yeah, that's great. What kind of sort of research do you get involved in?
We do the most. Well, we did the first study with Midwestern University here in Downers Grove, where we are. It's a medical university. We did the first study with them on autism and scuba therapy. So they went through every person with autism that we had ever worked with since we began, and they interviewed them. And it was a lot of soft research, quality of life, and would tell us about this. How did you feel? But they interviewed the parents too, which was really eye-opening for us, because a lot of times we work with them in the pool, and then they go home with mom and dad, and sometimes we don't get to see what goes on in their home. And the benefits of scuba therapy were amazing when the kids got home, with the confidence, independence, focus. The thing about kids with autism is, and people with autism, is pressure is a therapy for them. So therapists will put pressure blankets on a kid with autism to get him back in the zone, right? Get his head back in the game.
Yeah.
Or they have pressure vests as well. And they have sensory deprivation rooms also to kind of bring their head back in the game. Well, obviously, when you go underwater, you eliminate surface distractions, right? You have the ambient pressure, which helps. The cool factor is off the charts, right? So now the kid can do, I'm a diver kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So there's all those things that we've seen benefit kids and families with autism. And Lewis is a great example. He's like a rock star now, diver. But so that's autism. But then John Hopkins went with one of the teams we trained down to the Cayman Islands with 12 veterans who had spinal cord injuries and PTSD. And they did more heavy research like blood draws and things like that, and found that there's an extra output of serotonin in the human body when you get to 66 feet or 3 atmospheres underwater, right?
Yeah.
And what they found was, during the pilot study, those 7 days that they were in Cayman, they found that 80% of the PTSD symptoms in the veterans were alleviated during that time they were there. They also, we've known this anecdotally for a long time, is chronic pain. You get immediate kind of relief sometimes in the water when we get them out of their wheelchairs. Just being able to elongate, to get range of motion, to get circulation and vascular benefits, because now blood's flowing in ways and your body's moving in ways that it can't in a wheelchair all day.
Yeah.
I had guys that are doctors who are paraplegics who dove with us say your GI, your GU, all sorts of, your bladder integrity is improved. So all sorts of physiological benefits. Again, why we want to build a deep warm water facility, so we can replicate this over and over and over and do even more intense studies. The Hopkins thing was done in 2011, and just, we haven't raised the money, or no one's been able to raise the money to be able to afford to have all these guys go back somewhere. But we're constantly doing stuff. We have 2 doctoral students this year, one from a university medical center out east and one from Midwestern University here, who are doing projects with us. So we try to keep the research ball always going. I presented at Grand Rounds at Duke University Medical Center, talking to the top hyperbaric physicians in the world. And it was really funny. There's a Dr. Arnold there who's like the top guy at Duke. And after I'm showing him all these pictures and talking through all these stories and about all these benefits that we've seen anecdotally, he turns to me, he goes, "Would it be okay if we link to your website?" And I go, "Well, let me think." Yeah, okay. It was funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, just, the more people in the medical community, that's what it's about for me. I'll go to dive shows so we can talk to our brothers and sisters in the community.
Yeah.
But I don't really chase people in the dive industry a lot. I am chasing people in the medical community. I want PTs and OTs and rehab docs and therapists to be looking at and trying to figure out how to do the next research project. Yeah. So we can say, here's what we do with Parkinson's now. Here's Alzheimer's. Yeah. Here's more PTSD research, more TBI research, you know. So those are the things we focus on. And then just spreading the word. You know, this opportunity is amazing to just get, you know, promote another podcast or another news story or another, you know, like I said earlier, today we win a big national award. I think at 2:00 they announced it, and there's and I can't tip it. They said you can't tip your hat yet as to what it is, but we'll be putting out a big press release later on about it. So we constantly are trying to achieve more in the medical field, so that, I mean, this is a big, you know, I mean, this is a huge potential therapy. I mean, we own zero gravity.
Yeah. Well, two previous guests, if we don't include Lewis in this, two previous guests. One was an ex-soldier. He got blown up inside a tank and all, and his body's sort of scarred with burns and whatnot. And his biggest release is salt water. Not only for the release of just getting out of the rat race, getting away from that, but his skin feels softer. He feels more relaxed. And then another friend of mine who was very early as a guest, he's got this chronic neck pain. He was in he got some neck injury in the RAF, you know, the Royal Air Force. And when he left, he had this neck operation that was it was do or die. You know, if they don't do it, it was going to get worse, but it's not got much better. And as soon as he gets in the water, just because he's weightless, his neck must sit in a different position and he's got no pain. Mm-hmm. You just can't stay there. That's the problem, isn't it? We can't stay down. We're not fish. So definitely, I 100% understand where you're coming from with the therapy thing, and think the more we can investigate certain things that we're not aware of or not have full understanding of, certainly people's lives will be made to be easier, more fun, and more open to other things that are in the world, instead of just enclosed. You can't do it, so you won't do it, instead of you can do it and you will do it.
The award we won, we were supposed to submit media to enter in this contest, or not contest, but this awards thing, and we the piece that put us out ahead of everybody else in the field was a piece about chronic pain, and about it was two individuals in wheelchairs, one a para, one a quad, incomplete quad. And during the video, CNN actually shot it, and this young man, we got him standing up, running along, walking along the bottom and using what abilities he had. And he comes up, he goes, imagine, he goes, standing up for the first time after 15 years. He goes, it's me again. It was powerful.
We just don't know we're born, do we, some of us?
I had a girl with no arms and no legs tell me one time. She was at Shriners Hospital. She would be the onboard person when new kids would come in with disabilities, and she would make them feel at home. But she had no arms and no legs. She was born with no arms and no legs.
Yeah.
She had little bitty stubs, and they devised a power chair where she could actually use a power chair to get around. Wow. And I was going through the hospital taking a tour with her, and one of her coworkers came over, able-bodied coworkers, and was giving her a hard time about something. And Anna looked up and said, "What do you know? You're a tabby." I looked at her. I go, "What's a tabby?" She said, "Temporarily able-bodied individual." And I went, I go, "That's me."
Yeah.
That's it. If you walk around, that's everybody. Because we're all just temporarily able-bodied. Eventually something takes us down, right?
Yeah. Wow.
So I thought we made little pins. We call them tabby pins.
Yeah.
So we've got the Diveheart pin logo, and then we have a tabby pin, and then we've got an OK sign pin. We have a young man who is a active Navy diver, and he passed away. And so to honor him, we have this little gold OK pin that we use to share our story.
So just wrapping things up then, do you want to give a bit of a shout out to anybody, or sort of highlight how somebody such as me might want to get involved or can get involved with you?
Sure. The easy button is, and I receive all the phone calls. So if anybody calls, I get the phone calls from the office and goes to me, and I send it where it needs to go. So, but diveheart.org, obviously. The media kit is really powerful. Like I said, we're redoing our media whole website now, but recent media is good. And then our YouTube channel, like I said, we have hundreds of stories. All the symposiums are put together on our media kit. Click on that. If you're a therapist or something, and you want to drill down medically into that and see what other doctors and therapists are saying about it, that's a great place to start. Sharing the story is huge. Obviously, we're not doing any water stuff right now, but just getting the word out, inspiring people. Right now, mental health is very important for people with disabilities because they can't do what they even could do before, any kind of adaptive activity. So to inspire them to think down the road, look what I might be able to do underwater, would be a great thing to do. And it's you hear from other people. You hear from people with polio or people with spinal cord injuries, and it's getting the story right from them and letting them inspire you. I mean, one of our largest donors came to us because she saw this public television. It's called Turning Point. It's a documentary. It's about 18 to 20 minutes long. She called the next day and she said, my husband and I watched Turning Point last night. And she's in Southern California. She doesn't dive. She doesn't know us from Adam. She said, we sat there and we cried. Where do I send a check?
Wow.
And she sent a check for $10,000 US. And every year for the last 5 years, she's increased that donation.
Jeez.
And those are people, and people will come out of nowhere that we don't know. My strategy as a nonprofit leader is it's like American football. I have a ground game and I have a long game, right?
Yeah.
So the ground game is the Rotary meetings, the outreach and education, getting your gear, your kits up to speed, fixing your equipment, all the things that you have to do daily, schlepping tanks, whatever it takes physically or whatever, presenting to school groups. The long game is talking to you in the UK. It's having NBC do a feature on us. It's having PBS do a feature. It's winning a major award nationally. That's the long game, because that's how people who don't know who we are going to find us and realize who we are and then share our story. And there'll be somebody then eventually that, helps us in a way we don't anticipate. Like we want our facility with deep warm water pool, we want it to be net zero. And in the US, that means green, totally green, off the power grid. Well, if I can do that and go out and talk about that, that's going to pull in environmental people that I don't know, like Leonardo DiCaprio, maybe somebody who is high profile that can help share our story. So that's the long game. The ground game is the daily, working hard and just getting stuff done.
Nice.
We focus on abilities and not disabilities.
Yeah.
I walk up to you in a wheelchair. It doesn't really matter to me how you got there necessarily.
Yeah.
You present yourself as a wheelchair user and you're incomplete or you're complete disabled, whatever. I find out what abilities you have. So if you can move this arm, I'm gonna make you use that arm or help you use that arm in a way where you can be independent underwater. So that's really important. And autism is such a wide spectrum and so many different ways to, like, there's 160 different variations, I think.
Do you find many parents or family members or friends use your sort of visual media, like your YouTube or your sort of websites and Facebook, to sort of help them understand what you do, in order to help them understand what you do with their family members or friends?
Right. Like if your friend's part of a autism group or eventually becomes one, where he's talking with other parents, sharing these stories that are specific to that disability is really important, and I'll go into a VA hospital, Veterans Hospital here, and I know you have Help for Heroes there, right? Yeah, we presented to them years ago when we had a chapter in Birmingham, and we showed the veterans programs. I mean, we have a whole list of stories that where veterans talk who have PTSD, who have traumatic brain injuries, who have, this saved my life kind of stuff. And that's really important to share, because then they realize there's light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not all, because you can lose yourself, right? If you become depressed and it becomes dark in here and in here, there's a lot of suicides. I mean, one of our pieces, a young man had severe PTSD. He was an Army veteran, and he tried to take his own life. And in that process, he lost both of his legs. And he came back, and he was talking to the reporter on public television that, I'm in a different place, and I'm in a better. It's kind of changed my life, and every situation's different, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, but yeah, he tried to take his own life, and he said, I didn't succeed.
But as long as he's got some of it back, then
and he went on a trip with us, and he looked awesome in Cozumel. Yeah.
Mm. Right. Well, Jim, I can't thank you enough for giving me some inspiration to look into more sort of things that I can do, as with my skills as an instructor, certainly within our club. I think the downside to doing it, if there is one within our club, is the lack of the practice that I can use. We don't often encounter people within the club format that we can do stuff with. So your trips out to Cozumel or whatever.
That's a really important part of what Diveheart does too, because there's a big difference in working with Help for Heroes or working with a children's hospital or working, there's a big variation. And I learned this the hard way, trying to think that it was a cookie cutter thing. Oh, I could have this there. Rehab Institute of Chicago, work with Shriners, work with the VA. It's all very unique, and knowing how to work with those doctors and therapists, and there's advocates in the rehab hospitals. I would say for your club, probably, reach out to community leaders in Rotary and different organizations and say, hey, we want to serve people with disabilities. Do you know anyone? They're going to go, yeah. On our club, we have the head of the rehab hospital here. I'm going to introduce you. And then you start talking to their physical therapists or occupational therapists. And now maybe one's a diver. Now all of a sudden they're going, oh, yeah, I totally get it. Yeah, we'll come to your pool and we'll get one of our kids kitted up, and you let them choose the participant that's right for you. Mm-hmm. If you wait for somebody with a disability to find your club, you're never going to do anything. Won't with it, yeah. If you want to be proactive, you can do that. And the book, the Diveheart manual, the instructor and buddy manual, and the online training talks about that as well. It's like how to grow your adaptive business as well. It's the business side as well as the actual things you need to know to be part of an adaptive dive team. And we changed the language. When I was out there in '97, and even when we started in 2001, people were handicapped divers, people were disabled divers, and I refused to use those terms. Mm-hmm. They're adaptive divers, because that's what we do as divers. We adapt, right? We use what abilities you have, and that's what we focus on.
Certainly a lot of food for thought, and hopefully a lot of inspiration, because certainly I think within the UK, the British Sub-Aqua clubs are a big thing over in the UK, and I try and advertise this podcast with them quite a lot, being a BSAC diver myself. So this DFA project that you have, the Diving for All, is certainly ticking all the right boxes, short of COVID locking down all the pools at the minute.
Right.
So people are doing this online training quite a lot. Sitting in front of your instructor like I am in front of you now, and we're doing all this. But to get in there, like I said earlier, with somebody with these who need the adaptive training, if we can start lining that up for when the pools do start opening properly, and
pull me in anytime with your NFA team. Yeah. If they want, I've been doing this a long time and around people with disabilities my whole life, and can help them because my media marketing background too. I'd love to know what they think. I mean, if someone were to look at the book and an NFA instructor trainer, and then look at our online training, I'd love to get their input too.
That'd be good, because I've got a very good friend who's quite high up within the BSAC, and she's a DFA instructor trainer. So hopefully me and her can have a little powwow, and we'll sort of do a bit of networking and pass things around and see what we can do.
Awesome.
Right, I'll not take any more of your time up, mate. I do appreciate you coming on. I've learned a lot.
Anytime I can help or you want to talk, let me know.
Absolutely, and hopefully between us we can share your message and get some more people on board, more donations, more people that need your training, rather than people like me who would like to become an instructor or a helper in some way. It's about the people that need that rehability, isn't it? So trying to get them on board, hopefully. So
yeah, we have different audiences. Yeah, we need participants with disabilities. We need you as an instructor. We need therapists and medical people. We need families to support the whole effort and stuff. But yeah, any way that I can help, let me know.
All right, buddy. Nice one. Well, have a nice rest of your day. Take it easy,
you.
and hopefully we'll speak soon.
All right, take care.
Cheers, buddy. Ta-ra, mate. Bye-bye.
So that brings to an end episode 33 with my friend Jim Elliot. Links to all the things we discussed are in the podcast notes. You've been listening to Are You a Scuba Diver? Fancy a Brew podcast with me, Andy the Northern Diver. You can find more scuba related content on my YouTube channel, and the link is in the podcast notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a 5-star review. And if you'd like to become a patron of the podcast, then visit www.patreon.com/fancyabrew. If there's someone or something you'd like us to discuss, let us know via our Facebook page. Thanks for listening. I'll see you on the next one.